Well, thanks very much for taking this interview. Obviously, these questions are only going to be used for research purposes only. I think there's about 7 questions in total. And I just basically want to start with asking you, businesses in general, why do they have the desire, do you think, to be seen as ethical in the marketing strategies? What sort of motivates them?
I think there's a variety of reasons, and well, I think probably the first thing to say is not all companies do care.
Yeah.
For many companies, it's probably something that's very much off the radar, but for those that do, there's a variety of reasons, which can be anything from it's something that their customers are explicitly concerned with, whether that's customers are concerned with a company's ethics in terms of their direct interaction with them, so they want a good deal, they want fair terms and conditions of exchange, those sorts of, the basic meat and drink, if you like, of having an ethical exchange with a company.
Okay.
To broader kind of what you might call other-centered, so concern for others, not just yourself, in terms of ethics, which might be anything from what happens in the supply chain of the company to what are the ultimate effects of its products on climate change, things like that. So there's a whole set of considerations that the customers might have, and the firms will obviously want to deal with those in terms of building a reputation with them.
Okay.
But there are other stakeholders too, which might be equally, sometimes even more important for companies who are looking to, particularly those who are at the front line of scrutiny from the media or from NGOs. So, if you look, particularly I think in the UK, where the media can be very interested in any kind of stories about corporate malpractice.
Yeah.
So here, companies, it may be their consumers, or it may just be really about managing their reputation with those constituencies, with NGOs, with the media, in terms of preserving a good reputation, because keeping yourself off the front page of the newspaper is crucial for preserving the kind of integrity of the brand. And these companies spend millions of dollars on creating a brand that's carefully constructed. That can all be taken away in a matter of days with one story getting on the front pages.
No. I mean, I guess you could use the recent example of, say, Google and Starbucks, where recently they found themselves because of obviously not paying tax. I guess you could use that as an example.
Exactly, I was just about to say it. It's it's the perfect example.
Yeah, it is.
In one sense, they work very hard to preserve their ethical image. They put a lot of investment into their sourcing procedures, those sorts of things, in creating this brand that's very strong on social values.
Yeah.
So it puts them in a very risky position, because there are all kinds of issues that can come out of the blue and hit them. And I think the tax one is one that, this is not an issue that's managed by their corporate responsibility department. No. It's not an issue that's managed by their marketing department, by their PR department. This is managed in finance, and so they don't know what's going on there. So it's a huge risk to a company like that.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, thanks for that. Just talk about your marketing, morality, and nature environment thesis. You talk a little bit about the social and green marketing. So marketing is a moral domain, and that it's not always for economic gain. I wonder if you could just elaborate and explain what you mean by sort of moral domain, and point out the differences between being morally ethical, between being moral and being ethical.
Well, I think when you talk about marketing, that as a whole, as a practice, as a phenomenon, as society, or as very much an in-company practice, there are so many ethical questions that arise around it, and one of the things I've tried to do with my work is to explore where questions of morality might get raised, or on the other side, where they might also get submerged in some way. Right. So my interest is often in, in the process of marketing, where does ethics come up? Where do people talk about it? Where is it relevant, and where is it allowed to be talked about?
Right.
And what can be interesting is the way in which marketing departments work, and is that the way you get things done is by being able to convince people that this is what the customers want, right? So
Yep.
regardless of whether you think something is a good thing or not, whether you think that, protecting workers in the supply chain is a good thing, whether you think that not having forced labor in your supply chain is a good thing or not, regardless of what you personally feel about that, you have to put that into the language of costs and benefits and why customers might think that's important.
Okay.
So when I'm interested in the kind of moral domain of marketing, I'm interested in that the way in which those ethical questions get reframed as questions of self-interest.
Okay, right.
That it's not about what we want; it's about what our customers want.
Right.
So if the customers care, then we care.
Right.
So going back to the Starbucks example, we'll try and minimise our tax as much as we can. But if the customers care about it, we won't.
Right. That's good.
So it's a whole question of what is setting the agenda for your values. Is it about an internal moral compass, or is it an external one where you're responding to what's expected of you by other stakeholders?
Okay, fantastic. Moving on to greening, it's become a huge issue, I think, really, as many sort of attempt to at least appear green in order to maybe get some market share or increase profits. Yeah. You mentioned how micropolitics and cultural dynamics have sort of underlined this, and thus leading to the identification of elements surrounding amoralisation. I was wondering if you could sort of explain amoralisation and how it may affect different types of organisations.
Yeah, it very much links into what I was saying really about the moral domain,
right?
Where environmental initiatives of various sorts, I mean, the way to get things done in business is to give a business case.
Right.
So I can't remember being at any kind of industry event around sustainability for the past 10 years that didn't talk about the business case and how important it is. Now, it is important. It's what turns the locks in business, right?
Yeah.
It's how you get issues of climate change on the agenda of large corporations.
Right.
But that has an effect then of taking away some of the moral impetus for why I might want to do these things. Right? We're not concerned about climate change because it's going to destroy the planet. We're concerned about climate change because there's going to be a price on carbon and we need to cost that into our financial calculations.
Yeah, that's very true.
So it's a change in the language of how we're dealing with a problem.
Okay.
And that has consequences. That has consequences for how you deal with the problem, and for who you get involved in trying to solve the problem. So it becomes simply a question of self-interest. You're looking to just solve your own problem.
Right.
So that's okay. How do we minimise our environmental costs?
Right.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That can have some positive effects on the amount of energy that you use, for example.
Okay.
So that's good in the short term.
Fantastic.
But if we think about it as a long-term problem, how do we deal with climate change? That's a public problem, not a specifically a self-interested company one. So that raises some other considerations that perhaps are not getting included in the discussion at the moment.
Right. Okay. Just moving aside from marketing for a second. I know that you point out that there are many dimensions along which to evaluate the ethics of a product itself. Let me just find it. I mean, you quote here that it says not just the intrinsic properties of the product, but things like the production and the nature of origin, a bit like what we said about Starbucks. I just wonder if you could talk about consumers and how they would personally judge whether or not a product would be ethical and how it may affect their sort of purchasing decisions.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's something that researchers as well as practitioners are struggling with, is trying to understand this decision by customers, because customers tend not to follow any what we would see as kind of predictable ways of behaving around ethics and social responsibility. That the kinds of issues they're concerned with change frequently over time. So the goal, if you like, of trying to say, okay, there are these there are these customers which are the green or the ethical customers, and they behave in a certain way. And there's these other customers who are the non-ethical ones, and they behave in a certain way. It just isn't true. All of us are, if at a basic level, ethical customers. We all want a better world. We're just not this. We're just different in the degree to which we're willing to make compromises of other features or qualities.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the ethical product, what we're talking about there is the core product is, the kind of what we're really looking for. So if we're thinking about a Starbucks coffee, some people would say the core product is the cup of coffee. Starbucks would tell you it's selling experiences or community or other sorts of things. Whatever you might want to regard as that core product. And then the other aspects are built around that as differentiators, as augmentations to that product. And ethics is one of those potential augmentations.
Right.
But it's never going to be the core product itself, right? People are never selling ethics. So it's always it always has to be secondary to that core requirement. So it can't impact upon the quality of that core offering, which has been a problem. If you think about, we could look at, say, coffee. We could carry on with that example. If Starbucks can only source fair trade coffee and it's a lower quality coffee than what they would use, then they're going to have a problem if they define their core product as the great coffee that people are.
Right. Okay.
So it's all about managing these trade-offs between what's essential that the consumer is looking for, and what are the nice to have added extras that may push them over the edge into making a purchase. But they're always balancing various ones, from ethics to quality, style, and other things.
Right. So that I think that kind of answers my next question as well. I just moved on to saying, companies that are ethical, such as the Day Chocolate Company, how would they attract customers? But I guess you said it already, is sort of look at what the customer wants and values most and respond to that, really.
Yeah, I mean, the Day Chocolate Company is interesting, and the fair trade movement in general is interesting because they've moved from this position of promoting their products primarily on their ethical credentials to promoting them primarily on something else that's, if you like, more fundamental to the product itself, quality or what have you. So Cafe Direct now promotes itself primarily on the quality of its coffee, or the quality of its tea, or the quality of what it's providing, rather than the fact that farmers get paid more. That's now an added extra rather than the main focus of their communications. And Day Chocolate Company similarly presents themselves as just another chocolate bar. It's great tasting, it's fun, with the added extra that it's fairly traded.
Right. Okay.
So this is an augmentation rather than the core product that the company is trying to sell.
Okay. Just going back to marketing for the last sort of couple of questions of the interview, what would you sort of perceive to be a company marketing in, say, an ethical manner? Is there a particular format, or does it change?
I mean, it's difficult to say because there are so many dimensions to ethics that we need to consider.
Okay.
All the way from that kind of an ethical transaction to those broader considerations. But the bottom line for all of those things, to my mind, is always about transparency and information.
Right.
So to what extent are people being given enough useful information to make an informed choice?
Right.
So that's both in terms of the quality of the product, its various features, its pricing, and those sorts of things, as well as its provenance, where it's from, who's been involved in making it, and then in terms of its impacts. What's going to happen when I use this product, both in terms of me personally, is it safe to use, those sorts of things, but also what's its social impacts.
Okay.
And companies that go further in providing you more and better information on those different dimensions are essentially, to my mind, the most ethical marketers.
Oh, right.
And that's difficult because a lot of marketing is about 30-second messages. It's about, a slogan. It's about a billboard with a stunning picture.
Yeah.
So it's difficult sometimes to make that balance between really capturing people's attention, but also telling them the whole story. That's a real trade-off that needs to be made.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's been very insightful. I think you pretty much answered all the questions that I've had and more. So
Great.
that's been fantastic. Many thanks for that.
No problem. Well, good luck with the dissertation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time as well. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Good. All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.